Welcome out, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I believe we are on chapter 5 of Revelation. That sounds right. We're going to keep rolling with it. Verse 1 is, Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. So we notice here that the number 7 is used again. As each seal is broken, there's going to be a corresponding event that takes place. There's 2 schools of thought here. One is that these events are sequential and that once they're finished, we will be at the end of time. The other view is that these events are cyclical. I tend to be more on the side of that latter viewpoint. I believe that prophetic vision gives us insight into the underlying systems and laws operating in the spiritual realm, of which the material universe is just a shadow, basically. It's something that's following along. It's the reflection. So the fact that this scroll is in the right hand of God indicates his complete power and authority over what is to come. And it is sealed to indicate the impenetrability of the mysteries contained within. And although we may become aware of the existence of the scroll, it is only Jesus who can reveal its contents. So verse 2 says, And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? So obviously not just anybody can get into it. Verse 3, But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. So this is interesting to think about. What exactly is it about the scroll that prevents anyone from being able to even look inside it? If this knowledge is kept in the right hand of God, then who is able to approach his glory? Verse 4, I wept and wept because no one was found to be worthy to open the scroll or to look inside. So why exactly did this bring John to tears? What is it about the knowledge contained within the scroll that he knew to be so important? And why did it upset him so much for the fact that nobody was able to get into it? Being a human means to be in constant conflict between the passions of the fleshly animal nature and the higher aspirations of the spirit, which reach towards divinity. Something deep within us longs to be united with our Creator, and the knowledge that we are not capable of approaching his throne in our current state is something of torment to us. So the knowledge that we're not able to understand, that we're not able to grasp, we're not able to look in and into these contents, and to not be able to approach God is something that when we are in right relationship to God is distressing to us, because we want to be close to him. We want to be in unity with God. Verse 5 says, Then one of the elders said to me, Do not weep. See, the lion of Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. So to me, this is the ultimate hero in the third act, swooping in. All hope is lost. There's nothing anybody can do. But then, bam, the hero shows up and you realize there's hope. And in this case, the battle is already won. He has already triumphed. Jesus has overcome the world, and because of his victory, he is able to break the seals. And I think that this really speaks to the purpose of what Jesus was doing when he came to earth. Adam and Eve were made in God's image, and then the intention was for them to do things in a certain way. God intended for them to walk in his footsteps and to grow in his image. However, when they were given free will and were unable to overcome the temptations of the world, things kind of fell apart. But because God is perfect and holy, that which is impure can't stand to be in his presence. So basically, we can't approach God. We can't come into union with him when we are impure. His essence burns away everything that is not like his, just as fire burns away everything that is not fire. So when Adam and Eve took their eyes off of God and turned their attention in on themselves, they created the separation between themselves and God. And that separation only grew as time went on. So you see, first of all, they hid from God when they had eaten of the fruit. God approached and they hid. They were clothed in garments of skin. That's more separation. They left the garden. Then the murder of Abel by his brother Cain, and then Cain goes on to build cities, which are the putting up of walls and further separation. So the further we get into sin, the more separation, the more we close ourselves off to God's divine presence. And Jesus came to restore what had been broken. He fulfilled that blueprint that we were supposed to. So whatever battle we face, whatever fear we may be up against, remember that Jesus has already won. He has already triumphed. And that's kind of what this verse is saying. Verse 6, then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the four living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. So the Lion of the tribe of Judah is announced. And what is seen is the lamb at the center of all that activity in the throne room. So the lamb, obviously is a symbol for Christ's sacrifice for us. Because God has created a just world, there has to be punishment for wrongdoing. But instead of allowing us to bear the burden of our failings, he took that punishment upon himself so that we could be freed from our debt. He appears here bearing the signs of his suffering, the lamb looking as if it had been slain, the innocent blood that was shed for us. And it's interesting too, is that, the lion is what is announced, but what appears is the lamb. The 7 eyes connect back to the eyes of fire in Jesus's first appearance in Revelation. They also connect to the 7 lampstands of the 7 churches, which is of the same illuminating and purifying substance, which symbolizes his vision as well. Having these 7 spirits of God as eyes points to the completeness of Christ's divinity and the wholeness which he offers us, and also to the omnipresence of his vision itself, his perfect perception, and not only what goes on in the world, but also in terms of spiritual insight and wisdom. And so this is obviously not pointing to any sort of disharmony in the operations or personality of God by saying that it's sevenfold, but the 7 aspects indicate the completeness, the unity of his boundless and infinite nature. The 7 horns are symbols of power. Deuteronomy 33:17 says, in majesty, he is like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox. With them, he will gore the nations. So the horn is the weapon by which animals exert control over one another. What's interesting to me about that is that predatory animals typically don't have a horn. So it's a weapon, but it's not necessarily one whose sole purpose is carnage and destruction. The fact that the meek, innocent, and slain lamb is the one with the perfection of spirit and power speaks to the nature of our salvation itself, and also to the war against darkness. It's not by our own power or by our own authority that we conquer or become worthy to stand in God's presence. Rather, it's through humility, by laying down our pride and surrendering totally to the power of his spirit, we allow God to change our hearts. The lamb is not strong because of its ferocity or because of its strength, but we see here that he has conquered in the image of meekness. And as we are called to walk in Jesus's footsteps, we learn that we become stronger the more we turn our lives over to him. So that laying down, that choosing to be meek, that choosing to not put our faith in our own strength, that is to participate in the symbolism of the lamb who is willingly led to the slaughter, so to speak. We're engaging in that same pattern, and it's not that we have to just sacrifice everything and we don't get anything for ourselves and everything sucks. It's like, no, like we understand that our strength comes from God, and so if we're trying to do it in our own strength and we're not letting God work on us and work through us and work for us, then we're kind of screwing ourselves over there. On the other hand, when we turn over that full control and that full reign to him, he takes over. And yes, we are surrendering, but we are victorious in that because he is winning the battle for us. He's the same God who turned the Nile River to blood. He's the same God who brought down the walls of Jericho and who conquered the grave. He has not stopped working in the world. It's the hearts of people that have changed, that have turned away, that have closed that door. So the image of the power and of the perfection of the Lamb encourages us to surrender our wisdom, our strength, and our nature to the only one who is able to save. Verse 7, he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. All right, verse 8, and when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. I actually really love this verse. So Psalms 141, verse 2 says, "May my prayer be set before you like incense. May the lifting up of my hands be like the evening sacrifice." This is a very interesting concept. First of all, you have to understand the relationship between the temple and the body. So just as we are made in the image of God, the temple is made in likeness of man. It's not a house built for God to live in. The temple itself is symbolic of us. It's the place of worship. And of course, we worship God with our body, with our mind, and with our spirit. It's a place where we go to offer sacrifices. And those sacrifices used to be of animals, but it wasn't the animal itself that really mattered. What the offering was pointing to was the inner sacrifice of our animal nature, the surrender of our passions and our carnal desires. That's the body. So the temple includes a water basin in which we wash ourselves, As we've already touched on in the previous episode, water, at least in part, symbolizes the mind. It's responsive, it's malleable, but when allowed to settle and be still, it reflects the image of he whose spirit hovered over the surface of the primordial waters of creations, and thus we are made in his image. The water cleans, it washes, and we are called to not only engage in the washing of the outside of the cup, but the inside as well. The washing of our hands in the temple only points to the inner sacrifice, that inner purity, the washing of our nature, of ourselves. The temple is where the incense is burned as a pleasing offering to God. And the smoke is our prayers, but it also represents the spirit. It rises ever upwards towards the highest, and in doing so, it fills the room with a pleasing aroma. Now, let's go a little bit further with all of this. Exodus 29:18 says, "Then burn the entire ram on the altar. It is a burnt offering to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, a food offering presented to the Lord." So why is the smell of cooking meat pleasing to God? Is he hungry? Well, that doesn't make much sense. Sometimes you'll see in pagan religions where they think that what they're sacrificing is actually being consumed, but God doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to consume the meat. He doesn't need it as sustenance, but rather a lot of times when pretty much always when it refers to the burnt sacrifices, it talks about the aroma, the smell being pleasing to God. So that's very interesting. What does that mean? Well, the nose distinguishes between what is good and what is rotten. So when you say that the smell is pleasing, what does that mean? Your nose discerns dangers that the eyes cannot. Your sense of smell protects you in ways that your vision can't. So food may look good, but smell terrible. And if we were to eat it, we would regret it very quickly. So when God is pleased with the aroma of our sacrifice, it's not because the meat is good, like because it's a good steak, but it's because what has been offered is in the right spirit. Romans 12:1 says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." Verse 9 says, "And they sang a new song, saying, 'You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and nation and people.'" In the idea of what they just said, of the tribe, the language, the people, and the nation, you have an expansive grasp of all people. So that statement is fourfold, because 4 is the number of extension in all directions. The redemption is offered to all of mankind across the ends of the earth. Verse 10, "And you have caused them to become a kingdom of priests for our God, and they will reign on the earth." So if sin is to miss the mark and therefore to have aimed at something other than God, then sanctification is what perfects our aim and moves us back into alignment with God's will. In that case, forgiveness is not just washing off the dirt. It's also removing the chains and the weights that were preventing us from walking in step with divinity. And as we are made in the image of the Creator, our highest aspiration is, in fact, to look more and more like Him every single day. To that end, we are made priests for God through redemption. Our purest state is one of communion with God and freedom from the burden of the carnal, physical drives and the downward momentum of material life. And that liberates us to integrate our hearts and our minds with the love of Christ. We are made ministers of His goodness and representatives of His mercy to the four corners of the earth. The offerings we present are not the bloody pieces of flesh, but a spiritual sacrifice in the true temple, made in the image of He who was slaughtered for our sake. All right. Moving into verse 11, but one more thing on that. Just understand that, through His power, we will reign over the corruption of the flesh. So no longer does the mind or the body dictate our actions. Rather, the Spirit will act in accordance with the will of God, and we will be of kings. So just pointing back to, what does it mean to rule the earth? Does it mean that we're going to be in charge of other people? I don't know, maybe, but I think at least in part it means that we are no longer a slave to earthly desires, right? We're no longer at the mercy of our hunger, our lust, our anger, our pride, or whatever else. We're in control of that through Him, through Jesus. Verse 11, then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. So the numbers here are not necessarily meant to be taken literally. There's a great many angels. There's a lot of them, too many to count, right? But it's clearly quite a lot. It's interesting to see how the angelic nations also are mirroring the human nations. So what is taking place in the physical world is also taking place in the spiritual. We are in a spiritual war, and in a very real sense, we are fighting alongside those hosts of angels. What we do in our part matters, and so does what they do in their part. We all have our own role to play, but don't misunderstand this. The role that you have been assigned is a very important one. If you are in a war, a real war, like a tangible, physical, traditional war, you know that you have to take your responsibility very seriously. If you, say, fail to deliver a message to somebody in battle, people could die. If you don't defend your position effectively, people could die. If you are not skilled with your weapon system, people could die. And just like in a real war, well, a physical war, I guess I should say, the great spiritual war requires of us the same discipline and commitment and carries the same consequences. They're very real. Now, not everybody is assigned to be on the front lines. Not everybody is spec ops roping into the jungles of, somewhere down in South America, maybe. I don't know. But we do all have our positions to play. Some are logistics, some are intel, some are admin, some are support, so on and so forth. God is perfectly capable of coordinating us effectively. We just have to ensure that we're doing what we reasonably can to aid the mission. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to sell our house and move to the Congo to convert indigenous people. Maybe it does, but maybe it just means being familiar enough with Scripture to be able to support something in your life, to be able to face certain challenges, to be able to confront certain people, or to stand up against the, opinions of the world. Maybe it just means being a good example to your family in place of business, so that Jesus is represented in the way that He deserves. Maybe for right now, it just means building your relationship with God, right? Getting free from those chains that have been weighing you down for way too long. Whatever it is, keep in mind that we fight alongside angels against powers and authorities of hell. And complacency, apathy, and denial of that spiritual reality are all weapons that are used by the adversary. And I think complacency is one of the biggest ones, because people think that, well, it's not that serious, because it doesn't seem like there's that sense of urgency and immediacy. And so we get stuck feeling as if we can let certain things slide. And it's like, He doesn't care if we pull off the reins just a little bit. That's still a victory to Him. because any deviation away from truth and away from God's perfection is a victory for the adversary. So anything that he can get us to do in terms of like, toning it down a little bit or just slightly changing our focus to things that are not as important, you can magnify that much easier than you can initially get somebody to change, right? Like if somebody's on the right path, it can be hard to get them off that path. But once you get them to change just a little bit, it's a lot easier to add on to that and to make it worse. Okay. Verse 12, in a loud voice, they were saying, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. So if you were a soldier, would you want to be led into battle by officers who had never seen combat and weren't going to be on the front lines? You had a choice, probably not, right? And let's say that you're competing in a high-level athletic competition. If your trainer does not have much experience in that sport and you start feeling stuck, would you maybe start to doubt his competence as a coach? Most likely, you're going to want your leaders to be people who have already gone before you and done the thing that you're about to go through. You want your teachers to be ones that have first-hand knowledge of the challenges that you're going to be facing. You'll also probably not want to receive criticism from anybody who's never been in your shoes, whereas when we have been through something tough, we're likely to treat other people in that same situation with a lot more grace and patience than we would have otherwise. And that is the leader that we have in Jesus. Whenever we start to wonder whether or not God is making the right call, or if he really understands what it's like to be in our position, we can take comfort in knowing that he's already dealt with whatever we're facing in a personal way. He's already experienced that temptation. He's already sacrificed that thing that we want. He's already stood up under that pressure. We have a Savior who's not only leading us from heaven, but also from the front lines as well. Because he went through the process and overcame the world, he is worthy to receive all the power, all the wisdom, the wealth, the strength, the honor, the glory, the praise, everything else. He understands what we're going through and can sympathize with our position. He loves us and will never lead us astray. Verse 13, then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them saying, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. In Matthew Henry's commentary, he says, it is a matter of joy to all the world to see that God deals with men in grace and mercy through the Redeemer. He governs the world, not merely as a creator, but as our Savior. Again, remember, he deals with us through the Redeemer, through the redemption of Christ. He doesn't judge us the way that we deserve to be judged when we are cleansed by the blood of Christ, because he has already paid that price. He has already made that sacrifice. We couldn't stand up under the law. We were not good enough for that. We were not able to approach God's glory. We weren't able to fulfill the grand purpose. And God said, I don't care. I'll still come and I'll give you a way to do it anyway. You deserve all this bad stuff. You deserve to be separated from me. You deserve to be burned away like the chaff. I don't care. I'll take that punishment for you. That is the sacrifice that we have in him. That is the leadership that we have in him. That is the relationship that we have with him. And that is a gift and one that should be taken very seriously. So God doesn't just rule as he looks down from above. He loved us so much that he chose to come and live his life as one of sacrifice, as an act of mercy. We couldn't live up to the standards of holiness that was required for that union with God. So he gave up his throne to become that living sacrifice, to take on the burden of death, which is what we deserve. But he took it for us. And last verse says, the four living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshiped. So if you guys enjoyed that, be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave me a good little review, all that fun stuff. And I will see you soon.